And since God's got you, you got this.
What's going on, Foundations Loveland, Foundations Windsor, Foundations Scattered, wherever you're watching us from online. So good to be with you. My name is Marcus. If we haven't had the chance to meet yet, looking forward to that. And hey, if you'd like to connect for coffee or something too, that's something I would love to do. Marcus at foundationschurch.org. Just check that out. We'll get something figured out to be able to do that together as well. I'd love to get to meet you if I haven't yet. But guys, I'm excited about what we're going to be processing today, but I actually think maybe we could just do the benediction now. Should we just stand for a closing prayer? Because that was like the best 25-minute service, I think, ever. Carl did an awesome job of preaching it out to us, and it's pretty much done. But maybe I'll just teach a little bit. Is that okay? Just maybe just a little bit? Oh, thank you. No, don't encourage it, because we'll be here till 3. But I'm really excited to process what we're going to be processing, what God's going to be pushing into our hearts today, because so there we were in Estes Park, suffering for the cause, and yes, a hot tub was involved. At any rate, so we're processing through, God, what's your heart for our church in this coming year? How's your heart beating for what you want to do in our heart this year? And like Carl said, it was immediately resonant with each of us. And by the way, what an unbelievable honor it is for me to be able to serve with and go through an experience like that with two men that I care for and respect so much. But it was immediately resonant to us that he wants breakthrough. That's what he wants for our church. So you need to understand this isn't like an idea dreamed up in some group of guys' head. We really believe that this is what God wants for our church as we go through this year. And so there we were on top of the mountain, and then we came back down to the valley. We came back to reality, and there goes gravity. And I turn on the TV Wednesday, and what do we see? But we see the storming of the Capitol. And I'm sitting there that evening with my little microwave dinner on the couch in front of the TV. And I got to be honest, guys, I'm typically an emotionally resilient man, but I cried. Hey, do you weep for our country? You know that's not a sign of weakness, don't you? It's actually a sign of strength. Jesus cried. Jesus wept for the people that he loved. It's okay if you do, especially if it drives you to do something. So anyway, I'm crying, and I'm watching what's going on. I'm just like, no. And I'm seeing people break the windows and storm through the halls and ransack offices and be in the chambers, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I've stood in those hallways before, like many of you have. I've looked out those windows. I've sat in those offices and pressed my case for God-honoring change in our country. I've stood and watched as our republic is at work in those chambers. I'm the son of a warrior who at great peril defended our freedom. I married a descendant of a founding father. And so in our house, we don't just talk about how fragile and precious our freedom is. We try to protect it and live out of it. But I'm sitting there and I'm watching this stuff and all the mayhem and the iPhone footage and everything of all these scenes. And I'm just moved. And I'm frustrated and I'm hurting. I'm empathizing. I'm struggling. I'm angry. I'm doubting. And then as I'm kind of staring at the screen, just eyes glued on all the images that were unfolding, like maybe some of you were, there were 4 words, one-syllable words, that kind of hovered over the chaos that kind of flashed across the screen. I wonder if any of you saw that too. I'm watching, and I've seen it before in person, but kind of above the credenza in the front of the chamber, there are these 4 words that are kind of blasted across the top of the room and just kind of hovering over the chaos. You know which words? Anybody else see those too? In God we trust. Yeah, that was it was incredibly ironic to see it in that moment, but it did something to me. Initially, it was just like a pfft. And initially, it was just a statement. But then as I kept kind of thinking about it and kind of drilling myself with questions, kind of grilling myself with God, are you still sovereign? Marcus, do you still believe that God is all powerful? Marcus, do you still believe that God is all loving? Marcus, do you still believe that God is all present? I'm like, yeah. And then something happened as I was watching those images and seeing that, ironic phrase, which is actually the official motto of the United States of America. That statement became more of a challenge to me. And the more I thought about it, the more I was actually praying. It's a good thing to do when you watch the news these days, is to pray while you watch the news. That challenge became more of a conviction. You ever had that happen before? You're thinking through something and it just kind of hits you more deeply. The challenge became more of a conviction, and it just got me thinking about how God is in the middle of all of this mess right now. He really is. And while that happened, that conviction kind of broke through my emotional discouragement and my fear and my frustration. Now, this is a cyclical thing. It'll come back in an hour or two, right? And then you got to go through the same process and remind yourself who you are and whose you are. But I wanted you to be sure to understand some of the biggest breakthroughs happen on multiple levels. So for me in that moment, it was an emotional breakthrough, it was a psychological breakthrough, it was a theological breakthrough. And there's all kinds of breakthroughs that we need in our lives. But the deepest level of breakthrough is a spiritual breakthrough. And you know what kind of breakthrough we need right now? You know what kind of breakthrough you need right now? You know what kind of breakthrough I need right now? Our country needs right now? It's a spiritual breakthrough, because spiritual breakthroughs are the biggest, deepest, farthest reaching, most impactful kinds of breakthroughs. And they usually happen on multiple levels. So we're going to talk about that kind of a breakthrough today. And I just wanted you to know, we just wanted to communicate, if you came in here, if you're tuning in, and you're still feeling angry or frustrated or scared or doubtful or hurting, or you got questions, I'm with you. We're with you in the middle of that. As a matter of fact, I had something completely different planned to teach. And I was actually ready on Tuesday. And so it was kind of, frankly, a little irritating when all this happened, and I thought, I got to pivot. So I actually called Pastor Carl, and we're talking, and I'm like, I just need you to kind of confirm, I think we need to go in a different direction. And we felt compelled, we need to go in a different direction. So the fantastic team that's here, we just pivoted midweek and realized we got to do a big shift, because we need to speak directly to the disorienting experience right now that we're all experiencing as a country. And that's gutsy, and it's bold, and it's risky. But it's important, and it's right, and it's holy, so we're going there, okay? We're going to process that together, because there's new pain and new questions that are on top of all the old pain and old questions that we're already experiencing with all the other broken pieces in our lives. So I got to tell you, just to be real honest, again, up front here, if you came in here looking for happy, clappy Christians, you ain't going to find any. Okay? Because our faith is not sappy and syrupy. Our faith is raw and it's real. And here at Foundations, we believe in a gritty kind of grace. And that's what we're going to be processing through today. Because, come on, after all, our faith grew out of a blood-spattered cross and a dusty, dark tomb. For crying out loud, right? So we're going to be real about what we're processing through today. And I'm not going to throw like a fistful of glitter at you. Okay? I'm not going to give you easy answers to these questions that we have. I'm not going to minimize your pain either, but I will give us some perspective as I actually try to accentuate the pain just a little bit before we get to the payoff in this message. Because I'm wondering, as we're in this series, You Got This, what is this? What is it that you got? And what I want to ask you is, do you have perspective? You got perspective? Because we need that right now. Moments like this reveal what we're really trusting in. So let's talk about, You Got This, perspective for the in-between time. Now let me explain. I'm going to try my best to help us to focus our minds and our hearts on nobody else than Jesus right now, because his presence in our lives really matters, always, but especially in the most trying times when our pain is the deepest and our questions are the toughest. Because I know we're just like a couple weeks out from Christmas, right? When everything was happy and we're like, woohoo, brand new year coming. But this week was yet another reminder that we are Easter people living in a Good Friday world, right? And that reality leads to questions, many of them actually, and none of them are easy. But here's one for starters. How do we deal with all the brokenness in this time in between Jesus' resurrection and Jesus' return? Well, one scene in the Bible is going to really help us with this. It's out of John chapter 20, the Gospel of John chapter 20. So if you brought a Bible or you got a device that you can take out and look up, that'd be awesome. If you got one at home, go grab one. Really encourage you to always be looking at Scripture yourself. It's okay, too, if you're in one of these rooms and you pull out your phone. We know you're not texting or emailing. You wouldn't do that. So go ahead. John 20, look it up, John 20. Also want to encourage you to take notes, because you're almost going to seminary today, okay? For the next 90 minutes, just kidding, but for the next time that we have, we're going to dive deep, guys, and I'm telling you, you're going to be, you can take pictures of the screen if you want to when we hit some of this stuff, but you're going to be like, where was that reference again? Just take notes. It'll help. It'll help you to be able to drive this stuff deeper. So John chapter 20, this scene happens about 33 years after what we've just been processing around Christmas, okay? fact, 3 days before this particular scene is when Jesus was killed and buried. In fact, this scene happens the night that Jesus was resurrected, the night of the day, the morning that Jesus was resurrected. This is a big deal. And Jesus is actually looking to do something to his disciples. He's looking to shift their perspective. And so he does something. He physically appears to them. That would do it, right? Especially after he had died. He physically appears to them. So John chapter 20, we're going to jump in starting in verse 19, and I'm going to give some running commentary as we go, and then we're going to apply it together. Here we go. Verse 19, John 20. On the evening of that first day of the week, Sunday night, when the disciples were together with the doors locked. Why were the doors locked? They're discouraged. They're in despair. They're afraid. They're frustrated. They're scared. Why? For fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them. Now, he stood among them with his physical resurrection body. This is really important because sometimes out in when we're hearing about people thinking about Jesus, they're like, yeah, I believe Jesus rose from the dead. But it was more metaphorical. It was kind of a more spiritual thing. It was like his teachings live on kind of a deal. And you need to understand that is absolutely, totally untrue. Jesus physically rose from the dead, and he physically appeared to his disciples. In fact, over 500 people he appeared to after he rose from the dead. And that's important because that's what we would call evidence, proof, okay? And so Jesus appears to his disciples, and he says what? Can you say that phrase? Peace be with you. Peace be with you. Peace be with you. He actually says it 3 times, so try to hear it as we go through this. After he said this, he showed them his hands and side. Now, why did he do that? Do you know what the only man-made thing is in heaven? Anyone know? There's only one man-made thing in heaven. Anybody know what that is? Jesus' scars. You ever think about that? So here Jesus is showing his disciples his scars. It's just kind of interesting. It's not enough just to say, here I am. He shows them his scars in his hands and in his feet. Why do you think Jesus' scars are the only man-made thing in heaven? Jesus' glorified body, he could have come out like brand new and just, with like no scratch, no scars, no bruises, nothing from what he had just gone through. But he chooses to keep his scars. Why? Because he never wants us to forget that story, the story that those scars tell. For all eternity, we're going to see those scars. So he shows the scars to his disciples because, again, he's trying to put something in front of their minds to shift their perspective. And this is going to take a big push to shift their perspective. He shows them his scars. And it says, again, that the disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. Overjoyed. So they have a new perspective. And again, Jesus said, peace be with you. And then he drops this this is like an A-bomb on their minds. Just here's the strategy of the church. Here's the mission of the church. Here's the vision of what the church is for them, for us, for all time. This is what the church is. Jesus, the one who architected it, by the way, the one who designed it. He says this, as the Father has sent me, I am sending you. As the Father sent me, I'm sending you. Sentness is a theme that happens in the Gospel of John over 50 times. Really, really important, and we're going to come back to that. Verse 24, now Thomas, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord. And how do you think Thomas reacted to this? Remember, this is Thomas who doesn't mind being openly skeptical, cynical, doubtful. I think Thomas was like, are you freaking kidding me? Are you stinking kidding me that Jesus appeared to you and he couldn't wait until I could come back from the store? I mean, here you guys are. I run out to get you the Slurpees. I come back, and you're telling me Jesus was just here? And so I think Thomas was probably struggling between a couple things. I think first he's like, you're messing with me again, aren't you? You know that I wrestle with doubt, and this is you guys playing with me again. I think he's mad about that. I think he's frustrated about that. And then he starts thinking, but what if they're telling the truth? And I think then he's hurt. And I think then he's mad because he's like, why would Jesus wait? Why could he? Really? So he's not there, and so he goes on kind of this tirade because he's so upset. But Thomas says this, unless I see, and the idea is like really see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. Now, when I was younger, I used to read this almost like with a British accent, like he was some Shakespearean actor or something, like Thomas was like, unless I see the nail marks in his hand, like peaceful or something like, almost like. But I don't think so. I think this is, I'm not going to do it because I can't, but if you almost like put a Bronx kind of accent in this, an angry Bronx kind of mafia guy, because that's what I think Thomas probably sounded like at this, because here's why. There's like some clues in the underlying language around this. He said, when he says, unless I see, he's like, unless I really see it, unless I really see the nail marks in his hands, unless I put, and the Greek word here for this, for put is balo, and when I was memorizing this in seminary, the way I memorized balo was, it literally means to throw or to shove, and I'm like, well, you throw a ball, and so that's how I remembered this, and he says, so here's Thomas saying, hey, guys, unless I really see it, and unless I shove my hand into the hole in his side, unless I shove my finger into the hole in his hands, I'm not going to believe. Thomas is angry as can be here. He's hurt. He's frustrated. He's got questions. Anybody relate to that? So there he is. Verse 26, though, has this amazing phrase in it. What are the first three words? Can you read that out loud? A week later. A week later. Now, this is huge, because imagine the time in between for Tom. Good gracious. So he's all mad, and then Jesus waits to come back for another whole week to visit them. And there's rumors of him visiting other people during this time. Like, what in the world? A week later, and during this time in between, Thomas is getting even more angry. He's getting even more frustrated. He's feeling even more hurt, and he's got even more questions. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Woo, bonus, he's with them this time. Though the doors were still locked, interestingly, Jesus came and stood among them. And again, he said, peace be with you. Can I hear you say that? Peace be with you. Can I hear you say that? Peace be with you. Thanks. Just making sure. Okay. And 3 times he says, peace be with you. And you got to understand this about Jesus. This is not a greeting. It's not like, what up, dog? That's not what he's doing. Jesus is doing something here. This is a royal declaration of a war that's been won by a king's blood. Now, come on, you got to think about that. So this is Jesus. This is the King of Kings who's coming in, and he's saying, peace be with you in the midst of anything but peace that they've been experiencing. They just saw him killed, and he's alive, and he's declaring to them, peace exists. And it's not just any kind of peace, it's his kind of peace. It's the king's peace. This is incredible. Verse 27, and then he said to Thomas, here it comes, go ahead, shove your finger in here. See my hands? Reach out your hand and throw it into my side. Guys, this is so powerful, because this is Jesus obviously not only showing proof, but obviously is revealing his omniscience. He knows everything. He wasn't physically in that room, but he was spiritually in that room. He knew what Thomas had said. And then I just imagine Jesus just lovingly going up to Thomas and putting his big old scarred hands, carpenter's scarred hands on his shoulders and looking him in the eye, maybe forehead to forehead, just almost like with a whisper. Stop doubting and believe. The words that he's used here are saying, Thomas, be convinced. Can you see me? You can feel me. Will you be persuaded? You can trust me. Even in the midst of your doubt and even in the midst of your questions, you can trust me. It's me. I'm really here, and I'm really alive, and I really came back. Thomas, you can trust me. And then verse 28, Thomas said to him, my Lord and my God. There it is. Breakthrough. Breakthrough emotionally. You can imagine, right? Breakthrough theologically, now he understands who Jesus is. Breakthrough spiritually, he says, my Lord and my God. And this confession is the climax of the Gospel of John. Everything points to these 4 words. My Lord, my God. And notice he doesn't say Lord and God. That would have been accurate. Instead, he says it in a way that makes it personal. My Lord and my God. He's saying, my Master and my Maker. It's just unbelievably powerful. And it reveals relationship. It reveals relationship between Thomas and Jesus as the Son of God. He's trusting in him. This breakthrough. It's incredible. But then Jesus says, last verse we'll look at, verse 29. Then Jesus told him, because you've seen me, you've believed. But blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Now, this isn't a rebuke for Thomas. This is a promise for somebody else. Who's it a promise to? Us. This is a promise to us. This is a promise of spiritual breakthrough. This is a promise of blessing. Anytime God brings blessing into our lives, it's spiritual breakthrough. Jesus is saying, hey, you're blessed if you believe this, even if you haven't seen me, even in a difficult time in your life. Pop quiz, when Jesus died, what did people think? Put yourself back. Good Friday night. Jesus died the afternoon, and they're burying him away. What were they thinking? They were like, this movement's going well. No, what were they thinking? They were thinking, it's over, right? That's what they were thinking. You remember, it's so important to understand there was nobody outside the tomb on Sunday morning doing the countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 1. Nobody did that. Nobody did that because they all thought it's over. But then, real early in the morning, before the sun had even come up, in this dark and dusty and cold tomb, have you ever thought about this? Can I just ask you to close your eyes and put yourself into that tomb? Pre-resurrection. Put yourself into the tomb. Jesus' corpse is on this cold stone. It's pitch black. It smells musty. But then all of a sudden, there was an electrical impulse. Think about that. Jesus' heart started beating again for the first time. And his heart suddenly starts beating, and then it keeps going, and then suddenly there's first inhale of air into his lungs again, and then his eyes open, and then he stands up, and then he walks out of the tomb. Guys, Jesus is alive. And so these guys, they thought it was over, but what they realize when they see him is that it's not over, that Jesus conquered death, that he physically rose from the grave. See, the point of the resurrection is that because Jesus is alive, it's not over. It's a breakthrough in and of itself. He's not done because he's not dead. Woo! Anybody want to cheer for that? That's amazing to me. And that's what this scene is all about too. 3 days later, that's what this scene's all about too. A week after that, that's what this scene's all about. But you got to see a parallel here to our present situation, the one we're living in right now. You're like, what? Check this out. This is going to freak you out. This is awesome. That week that Thomas waits is unbelievably similar to the period of redemptive history that we are living in right now. And I'm going to call this the in-between time. And here's what I mean by that. I'm going to kind of just ask you, so what does this look like? Just maybe I should finish it. So how about now? It's an empty. It's supposed to be an empty tomb. I'm sorry. I feel like I've scarred all of you. So this. I almost wish we could edit that. This is an empty tomb, and now let's consider this as a timeline. Oh, mercy. And this is Jesus coming back. Now, we're going to explain this in a second. Empty tomb is talking about the resurrection, where Jesus not only rose from the grave, but let's also call this his ascension, okay? So this is empty tomb, Jesus resurrects, and he ascends, and then this is a period of history. This is a period of time, and we're told that at some point, we're going to dive into this in a minute, Jesus is coming back. Here's my best Jesus. Jesus is coming back. But in the meantime, we're living in the in-between time. I don't know where the dot goes, but you are here. And the in-between time is a really difficult time, isn't it? Now, here's where I'm going to accentuate your pain a little bit. Because I don't know if we really understand the depth of the pain and the darkness and the difficulty of this season. We might, man, it's Wednesday, I can remember that. But I'm going to accentuate this pain a little bit, and this is really important for us to be able to understand. And before I even do that, I want to talk to you about something. We talked about the resurrection. I want to make sure you understand the return so we can bookend this in-between time. Now, a lot of times in churches don't talk about the return of Jesus because there's a ton of debate around the details of how he's going to return. So sometimes churches are like, I'm not going to touch that. And that is such a shame, because that robs us of such crucial perspective during this in-between time. And so no pastor worth their salt is going to deny the fact that Jesus is coming back. And so we're not going to avoid that. Not here at Foundations. We're not going to avoid helping you to have the right kind of perspective about the fact that not only is Jesus risen, but Jesus is returning. So we want to give you a quick little kind of a crash course on Jesus' return. And this is where, if you haven't started taking notes yet, this would be a helpful time. Because this idea of Jesus coming back, of returning, if it was mentioned once in Scripture, is that enough? Yeah, that'd be enough. Sure it would. If it's mentioned in Scripture, God's saying it, and so there we go. It's mentioned over 300 times in Scripture, guys. In just the New Testament, actually. So just the New Testament, over 300 times, we're told that Jesus is coming back. And Jesus himself gives us the gift of like 2020 vision, which from now on, let's say 2021 vision, because I'm sick of saying 2020, all right? He gives us 2021 vision around several specific aspects of his return that we just want to make sure that you know. So super quick crash course on Jesus' return. Fasten your seatbelts. You ready? All right, number one, Jesus' return is sure. It's sure. Every reference of his return in his own teachings proves that Jesus viewed his return as an inevitable and definite future event in redemptive history. John 14:3, if you're taking notes. John 14:3. The question is not if Jesus will return, but when he will return. And after his resurrection, moments after Jesus' ascension into heaven, and his disciples are sitting there and they're staring up at the clouds as he's going up, as he's disappearing. Angels all of a sudden are standing next to them, and they give this testimony. They say this in Acts 1:11. They say, this same Jesus who's been taken from you into heaven will come back. Number two, Jesus will return the same way he left. As Jesus ascended into the clouds that day, the angels confirmed that Jesus would return in clouds of glory. That's Acts 1 again, 9-11. And when Jesus was on trial before his death, he gave this testimony of how he would return. This is Mark 14 and 13, Mark 14:62 and 13:26. He says, you will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with great power and glory. I wish we had more time to get into this, but real quick, and just a special service, so I didn't share this any other time. The cool thing about that is that clouds is an Old Testament symbol of judging and judgment. It's like it's an intense, dark, foreboding, ominous thing. Ironically, Jesus is being judged in that moment by the Sanhedrin, the highest court in the Jewish land. He's being judged, and yet he's the judge. Did you ever catch that before? Cool, right? So Jesus is saying, yeah, I am who I am, and I'm coming back, and you're going to see me. Number three, Jesus' return will be soon. Parents, last time you did a cross-country trip, what was the most common question your kids would ask? No, in my car, it's, Dad, are we lost again? But what did you guys say? Are we there? Yeah, are we there yet? I guess I've heard that that's the most common in other families. And so what's your response when that question is asked? No. And then the follow-up question is, when will we get there? And then you say, I heard somebody say it over here, soon, right? Guys, here we are in this time in between, right? And we're saying, Jesus, are you coming back yet? And he says, no, almost. When you coming back? And his answer is, soon. Jesus will return soon. In other words, his return is, for a theological term around this, imminent. His imminent return, meaning it's likely to occur at any moment. Now, get this is so cool. Not one prophecy needs to be fulfilled in Scripture before Jesus returns. Not one prophecy needs to be fulfilled before he comes back. Revelation 22:12 says this. In fact, it's Jesus saying this. He says, look, I'm coming soon, and my reward is with me, and I will give to each person according to what they have done. It's another kind of judgment theme. You're seeing that start to percolate some more. Number four, God only knows when Jesus will return. How soon is soon? God only knows. In Acts chapter 1, Jesus told his disciples that the day and time of his return is, quote, is known only by the Father who said it by his own authority. So what should we do? Should we just try to keep guessing? I think it's this Friday at 2. No, what should we do? Here's what we do. Here's number 5. Jesus commands us to keep watch for his return. That's what we do. Jesus repeatedly commands his followers to keep watch or to stay alert for his return. And these phrases, keep watch, stay alert, comes from a word that's actually a word picture. And it's a word picture of a sentry or a guard that's in a watchtower at night along the wall of a city. And he's carefully, diligently scanning the horizon for any movement of the enemy army that at any moment could be coming back. This is the idea that we're seeing in this. Keep watch, stay alert. And this command to live our lives with vigilant anticipation of Jesus' return is repeated, get this, by every other New Testament author. Number 6, Jesus tells us the best way to prepare for his return is by being his servants. When the disciples pressed Jesus on precisely when he was coming back, because they did that because we would have done that, his response is essentially, never mind that. Just do your job. Just be my witnesses. Just go and be the church. So, you want to be prepared for him? Be productive for him. Let him catch you, being faithful and diligent, lovingly serving him when he returns. When you do that, on the day that he does return, on the day that he does judge us, and we will be judged, then you'll get to hear him say, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Come and share your master's happiness." So this command to keep watch is way more than merely a command of heightened awareness. It's also about heightened activism. That's how real Jesus followers will live, in habitual, real-time readiness for his return. Lastly, number 7, Jesus will return to reward the righteous, meaning those who have trusted in him, and our righteousness comes from him. Doesn't mean people who haven't blown it. Jesus will return to reward the righteous and judge and punish the wicked. And man, there's so much that we could go through around that. The judging and punishing of the wicked is something just to briefly hit on. We're told that there is an actual literal place in Scripture, and from Jesus' own mouth, that's actually called hell. This is harsh stuff. I told you I was going to intensify pain before I relieve it. And we're actually told, though, and this is Matthew 25:41, that place was prepared for somebody, prepared for the devil and his angels. Again, this is from Jesus' own mouth. Hell wasn't prepared for humans. Humans don't belong there. God doesn't want any humans to go there. His people that he loves, he's created, his children. Matthew 25:41. Check that out. And if that messes with you a little bit, just keep studying Scripture about it. But it's incredibly sobering, isn't it, that Jesus says, hey, here's an outcome for those who don't have my righteousness. So friends, please listen to this as I apply it to today. Anytime you see injustice happening in the world around you, like when you see people deliberately inflicting pain on other people, you don't have to wonder what's going to happen. You don't have to wonder if justice is going to be served someday. Because each and every person, and that includes each and every one of us, because each and every person will be perfectly judged by the perfect judge. And depending on kind of which side you're on of the cross, you can take great comfort in that. And I hope you all do, because this judge isn't just. This judge is also perfectly accurate. He's perfectly wise, and he's perfectly loving. And what that means is we can entrust ourselves and our times to him. In a moment like this, that brings incredible comfort to me. So these are facts about Jesus' return, just 7 of them, but from Jesus' own mouth. There's a whole lot more we could share, maybe sometime, but these give us all the clarity we need for how to live during this time. In the meantime, in the between time. Because what do we know about this in between time? It kind of looks like this. It kind of looks like ridiculously messy and dark, and there's all this crud going on. It's like, when are we gonna get out of this? That's what my life looks like right now, in the midst of the in-between time. Is that what your life looks like right now? In the meantime, in the between time, how should we live? Knowing that Jesus has resurrected and Jesus is going to return. Well, we don't need Thomas to tell us that this in-between time is an incredibly difficult time, do we? But I'm just going to throw some stats at you, and this is probably for 2.5 minutes. It's going to be extremely heavy, okay? And then we're going to come up for air, I promise you that. But one thing I should say is that while we absolutely cannot deny that there are signs of joy and that there are signs of goodness in this in-between time, can't deny that when we look around. For the most part, this time, this season of redemptive history where we live right now, in the in-between time, is characterized by darkness and pain. Just to help us to be able to understand that, according to Johns Hopkins, as of this morning, 89,751,136 people have contracted COVID worldwide. 1,928,636 of those people have died. Those are all people, all those numbers. 372,522 from the U.S. have died. Not including COVID, the World Health Organization says that another 50,000 people die every day from other infectious diseases. 50,000 every day. Somewhere in the world, every 5 seconds, one child dies of starvation. Every 5 seconds. Over the last 150 years, 160 million people were killed in war. Right now, at this moment, as we speak, there are over 40 active conflicts or wars that are happening all around the world. Millions of people have died from thousands of natural disasters since 1900. There are anywhere from 20 to 30 million slaves in the world today, men and women and children, who have been dragged against their will into the evil epidemic of human trafficking. 20 to 30 million people today. Right now in the U.S., over 30 million people are addicted to drugs and alcohol. And this one's a difficult one. 62.4 million children have been aborted in the U.S. since 1973. And 1.6 billion children have been aborted globally since 1980. And then as long as we're piling on, there's also shootings that happen in schools and in synagogues and in churches. There's terrorist attacks. There's crime of all kinds in every country. There's greed. There's lust. There's hate. There's betrayal. There's racism. There's rage. There's violence. There's deceit. There's tyranny. There's pain. And most of us have known full well that all this pain exists, but doesn't it seem like it's just getting a little bit closer to home each day? Guys, when we don't see Jesus physically, but we do see all of this happening in the in-between time, we don't need Thomas to tell us that the in-between time is just hard. In the in-between time, there is a lot of hurt and a lot of darkness and a lot of fear, a lot of anger, and a lot of questions with no easy answers. Like, here's some incredibly tough ones. Where is God in all this mess? If God really is all loving, if God really is all present, if God really is all powerful, then why doesn't he stop it? God, why do you allow suffering to exist? Jesus, when are you going to return anyway? What are you waiting for? And those are good questions, and you don't have to worry about asking God your toughest questions. You as parents, when your kids come and ask you their toughest questions, is that a sign that they don't love you? That they don't want to be in a relationship? Absolutely not. It's a sign that they're coming to you for something they're really struggling with. This is an unbelievable expression of your love and relational depth. Bring to God your toughest questions. It's okay. But this is the in-between time. And if it was up to us, we would remove this, wouldn't we? We'd remove the in-between time. We'd kind of just fold the paper and like, woo-woo, right? Jesus, return quickly. And we'd pick the date, probably this afternoon. But in the meantime, we are in the in-between time. And the question is, how do we deal with all the brokenness, darkness, and evil in the in-between time, the time in between Jesus' resurrection and Jesus' return? Well, let's get to the payoff for this. It means getting perspective, not just any kind of perspective, but holy perspective. I want to share with you 4 different things that over the course of 20 years of ministry, when I've had the privilege of sitting in the front row seat to people's pain in their lives, in their marriages, in our communities, in our nation, 4 things that I've seen people who don't give in, they don't give up, but they grow up in the midst of pain like this. People who don't freak out, but they actually dig into their faith. They don't give in to fear. So I want to finish up giving you 4 pieces of a holy perspective, and it's going to spell the word this. So if you're wondering, when you came in, you were given a card here, either here at Loveland or at Windsor, and it looks like this. Now, this card, the intent behind this thing is that you carry it around, that you keep it with you. It's waterproof. You can't rip it. It's indestructible. You're going to try. I know. That's okay. But the point is, we say, you got this. Well, what is this? We're going to talk about what this is. These are 4 lessons that I've learned from people's lives who have successfully been navigating the in-between time. And interestingly, these are things that we also see in Thomas's experience in John chapter 20. The first one is this. The T for this, you got this, is what? It's trust. Trust God for an eternal perspective. An eternal perspective. Trust him for that. Guys, you got a choice. Anytime you're in a crisis, I used to tell people this all the time when I was a hospital chaplain years ago. You got it. This is a crossroads right now. You can either choose to trust or you can choose to despair and run away. Every single crisis you will ever face puts you at a perspective crossroads. Will you take the short-term view or the long-term view? Thomas, in this passage, he has a breakthrough because he goes, my Lord and my God. He understands who Jesus is. And that means our risen, returning, eternal King offers real perspective when you're feeling real pain. It's a perspective that just lets you see through and beyond the pain to another time, that we could talk about another time. This is a time beyond the in-between time to the future that we're going to have with him. And Jesus asks us to trust him for that. He asks us to trust his heart, which he has proven over and over again throughout all of history, culminating on the cross. Jesus asks us to trust his purposes, which, can we just be honest, are never clear in the moment, right? But you can know, because you know his heart, that they are only ever always for your good. He asks us to trust his heart, his purposes. He asks us, and this is a tough one when you're living in the in-between time, he asks us to trust his timeline. That even though everything that we're seeing around us right now is dark and painful and hard, that there's another time that's coming, that it's not over, that today isn't the end because he's not finished. And so you can despair because of what you see around you, or you can choose to trust that Jesus is really alive and he's really at work and he's really coming back. When? Soon. Even when things around you still look horribly broken, because they are. Remember, we talked about this at Christmas. As Christians, as followers of Jesus, we don't deny that brokenness exists. That would be foolish. But we do deny that it has the last word. Who has the last word? Jesus has the last word. And the hurt that you're feeling right now, you need to understand, is temporary and that it won't last forever. But your joy with Jesus will. So don't let fear be the dimmer switch of your faith. Get an eternal perspective. H, hope. Hope in his promise. Don't just hope in anything. Hope in his promise. See, you can choose to focus on all the hurt, or you can focus on your hope in him in the midst of your hurt. That on one day he is going to return to put all things to right. And in that way, you actually live out a deeper in-between time reality, and it's this. In the in-between time is when hurt and something else actually hold hands. Now, this is fascinating. I'm going to ask you a question. Where does hope only exist in redemptive history? Does hope exist in heaven? There is no hope in heaven. I'm here to tell you. And that shouldn't make you hopeless now, but there is no hope in heaven. Why? Here's the thing that's so cool. Because in this in-between time, hope is this amazing gift, divine gift to us in this very unique time in redemptive history where we need, in the midst of all this darkness and pain, to realize there's something else coming because someone else is coming. And when we're with him, when all his promises are fully fulfilled, we don't need hope anymore because we have him. I mean, that's incredible to me. The in-between time is when hurt and hope hold hands. Do you have that kind of hope? When you see images on the news of whatever's happening in the world, do you lose hope? Do you need to lose hope? Hope is a settled conviction in a future reality when we will be with him, the risen, death-conquering King, and all of his promises will be completely and utterly fulfilled. In this in-between time, we don't just have hurt, we got hope. We got his hope. You got this? This is what hope is all about. The one who walked through death and now lives forever for you promises in this passage we read, you will be blessed if you believe, even when you don't see him. Meaning, when we're hanging on to hope in the in-between time. And this is really good to know. See, this blessing is a promise. And I should remind you at this point, Jesus has never failed to keep even one promise, ever, that he's ever made. And what that means is this. We're still going to experience a lot of pain in the in-between time before this promise is fulfilled, but his promise will be fulfilled someday, that day. And I believe that. You guys believe that? You got this? King Jesus says you're blessed if you do. And this is a walk by faith perspective, not by sight perspective. See, there are larger things happening in God's sovereign plan that we simply don't understand right now. This is much like the disciples. They didn't understand when God himself died on a cross right in front of them. They had no idea what he was achieving for them through this apparent catastrophic defeat and intense darkness. And so, guys, we can be afraid and we can be angry and we can lock ourselves in a room somewhere. Or we could be filled with trust and we could put our hope in a supernatural, loving, eternal, risen King who promises to return and to reward us when? Soon. The I stands for in-between time peace, because this isn't any kind of peace again. It's in-between time peace. It's exactly what we need in this in-between time, and that's why Jesus said, peace be with you. Whose peace? Not just anybody's peace, his peace, a king's peace. The peace that royally declares that he's won the war against our greatest enemies. And this peace isn't an emotion, okay? It's not a feeling. This peace is a fact. The reason why it's a fact is because this peace is a person. If you're taking notes, Ephesians 2:14, Jesus himself is our peace, is what that verse says. Jesus himself is our peace. See, real peace is the very real presence of Jesus himself with us. Not just in the in-between time, but through that and beyond that, forever. That's the kind of peace that we got. It's not just in-between time peace. It goes beyond that. John 16:33, Jesus says this, in me you can have peace. In this world you will have trouble. Notice, these aren't like, wait a minute, I thought you just said we'd have peace, which means no problems. That's not, I don't know why I use that accent. That's not what Jesus is saying. Jesus is saying, you're going to have my peace. No, you're going to have tons of trouble. But you're going to have my peace in the midst of that trouble. So he says, in me you can have peace. In this world you will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. So again, his presence does not take away our pain from us in the in-between time. But his peace persists amidst the pain. See, this is grown-up Christ follower stuff that we're talking about today. This is Jesus asking us to trust him in the middle of trouble, despite our questions, despite our frustrations, despite our fears, despite our doubts, like Thomas. You trust me? Are you going to say my Lord and my God? Last one, S stands for share his presence. That's what we've been sent to do. My very first week in ministry, I was a hospital chaplain at a large hospital in downtown Chicago. I'm in my grad school dorm room, getting ready for the day, listening to the news on the radio, and I hear that there had just been this horrible, terrible accident on Lakeshore Drive where a car jumped the median, going way too fast around a curve, and just hit head-on this other car, and all 4 young people instantaneously died. 30 seconds after hearing that, I'm thinking, that's terrible, that's horrible, wow. 30 seconds after that, I get a phone call. And it's from the hospital. Now, I was a hospital chaplain at this time, and so the hospital ER is calling me in, and they said, hey, we just had this terrible accident, and one of the patients at DOA, dead on arrival, is coming in. The mom is on the way. The doctor wants you to tell her. And I'm like, okay. So I call my supervisor, and I left a voicemail because he didn't pick up strategically, saying, hey, I am in way over my head with this one. I really think you should take this. You're going to be great. I can't wait to learn from you. And he didn't answer my call. He didn't return my call. So I thought, well, I better get there. So I ride my bike there, and I get into the ER, and it had been a really bad night in Chicago, and all the beds are full. So they had this person, their body, in another room kind of off to the side, door on it. There's a stainless steel table, and I walk into this room, beat the mom by a couple of minutes, and I see this guy, 23. I was 23. Except he's dead, and I'm not. And I'll never forget, he had like all these pock marks all over his face from where the glass shattered and just sprayed into him, and just laying there, and I'm in this room alone. Never been in this kind of a situation. Ma comes in, and here's the table, and she's right here kind of by his chest. She just can't believe her eyes, what she's seeing. I've never seen such intense grief in my life. I've never heard the kind of screams that I heard from her, the kind of tears that she cried, and she's here, and she's just laying across his chest. She'd pick up an arm and drop it, just keep shouting, wake up, wake up. And guys, guess what I did? Nothing. I had no idea what to do. My mind is racing. I'm like, oh, it's Romans 8:20. I could tell her that all this is going to work out for good. No, that's not going to really help. Well, I could talk to her about heaven. I was like, no, that's not going to help right now. I could tell her God wants you to have peace. No, that's not going to help right now. So all I knew what to do is to kind of inch closer to her and put my hand on her shoulder. And she just crying and doing that, and every now and then she'd turn to me and like cry into my chest, and she'd get me all wet and like hitting me and crying and turning back, and she's just intense grief, and I didn't say a word. About 90 minutes of this goes on, and she just picks up her purse and starts to walk toward the sliding glass doors of the ER, and I just kind of follow her behind her. And then as she steps out the doors, she just kind of turns around and just says, thank you, and walks away. Never saw her again. And you know what? I thought I failed in that moment. And in the process group we had, I talked about, I wish I would have done this and said this. And you know what I learned in that moment? I learned something so powerful that I've taken with me for a couple of decades of ministry, and it's called this, the ministry of presence. The ministry of presence. This verse that Jesus shares, as the Father sent me, so I send you, was on my podium. That's gone now. It's actually engraved on the side of the podium. That was a cool trick. And it says, as the Father sent me, so I send you. John 20:21. I want you to remember that because we have been sent. How? To share his presence. Guys, the people around you right now are in unbelievable pain. You are too, I know. But you need to understand that your heart, your hurt, so aligns you with God's heart that you don't even realize that it allows you to overflow with his hope into their lives. Jesus said, as the Father sent me, so I send you. We as the church have been sent out into this world, not to lock ourselves away in rooms because we're afraid or we got our own questions, but to help people to understand through how we're living that we have trust in him, that we have hope in him, a real hope, that we have an in-between time kind of peace, and that when we live like this, when we got this, it's going to overflow and other people will also know his presence. We get to share his presence because that's what we're sent to do. And friends, I know of no other hope for the human race in this in-between time than the risen and returning King of Kings, Jesus. And we're the church. And he's got no plan B. And we're called to go out into the world. Because when we live like this, with trust and hope and peace and sharing his presence, not only are we going to be blessed, he promises that, but we're going to be a blessing. So you got this? Can we stand together? We're going to sing a song that's going to be one more dose of God's blessing and encouragement to give us this kind of perspective. Let's sing this and then we'll be done.